At the Will Reading and Harrison and Associates law firm downtown, my older brother William stood up like he'd already been crowned, straightened his silk tie, and announced with the smuggest grin imaginable, "Father and I agreed years ago. Cruise Industries, all commercial properties, and the investment portfolio come to me. Sharon, you'll receive a comfortable settlement." The conference room erupted. Applause, congratulations. Someone actually said about time. Business Associates shook his hand like he'd earned something. His wife, Caroline, glowed like she'd just inherited a kingdom. And Mother pressed a tissue to her eyes with that practiced, proud tear. I didn't applaud. I didn't even shift in my chair. I just locked eyes with Father, frail in his wheelchair but alert, and said, calm as a closing argument, "Father, have you forgotten?" His hand trembled on the armrest. William's smile died. Caroline's champagne glass stopped halfway to her lips. 25 people went silent so fast you could hear the air conditioning click on. And in that single heartbeat, every single person in that mahogany-paneled room knew the succession plan they'd celebrated for months was about to shatter. Before I tell you exactly what my father remembered and how the next hour dismantled my family's carefully constructed lies, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from tonight. I always like knowing I'm not the only one who sat in a room full of people who swore they valued you right before they showed you what you're actually worth. Hit that like button if you've ever had to smile while your entire family celebrated your erasure, because trust me, what happened next made every single one of them regret underestimating me. Now, let me take you back to how we got here. My name is Sharon Cruz, and if you'd met my family before that Will Reading, you'd probably have thought we were the definition of American success. Sprawling estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. Mercedes and Bentleys in the circular driveway. Annual galas where Mother wore diamonds that had their own insurance policies. But those perfectly staged family photos never showed the quiet hierarchy that governed everything behind the crystal chandeliers and imported marble. William has always been the son everyone orbited around. From the moment he came home from the hospital, people noticed him first, listened to him longest, forgave him fastest. Private school star, varsity lacrosse captain, the son groomed from birth to take over father's commercial real estate empire. Every family dinner ended with someone raising a glass to the future of cruise industries. Every board meeting included William, even when he had nothing valuable to contribute. He absorbed the attention like it was oxygen he was born breathing. I learned early that I lived in the shade he cast. Teachers mixed up our names until William corrected them with that charming laugh that made everyone feel included in the joke. Everyone except me. Birthday parties meant his cake got carried out first, candles blazing while the rooms sang louder. His college acceptance to Yale was framed in the hallway, even though he barely maintained a 3.0. My acceptance to Columbia Law on a full academic scholarship earned a distracted, "That's nice, dear," from Mother before she turned back to discussing William's fraternity dues. Business dinners were the worst. I'd sit at the table, 15 years old, asking Father about commercial lease structures or cap rates, genuinely curious about the empire he'd built. He'd start to answer, then William would interrupt with some story about lacrosse practice, and suddenly the whole table was laughing, listening, leaning in. I learned to stay quiet, to take my plate to my room, to stop expecting a seat at the table that was never meant for me. When I asked to shadow Father at the office during summer break, Mother actually laughed. "Sweetheart, business isn't for girls. You should be thinking about your coming out party, not boring contract negotiations." William went to the office every summer and spent most of his time playing golf with clients, but somehow that counted as learning the business. I stopped asking, stopped hoping, stopped waiting for someone to notice that I taught myself to read financial statements by 17, that I could spot a bad investment faster than Father's CFO, that I actually cared about the company William treated like his personal ATM. The day I turned 21, I packed everything I owned into my car and drove to Manhattan. Columbia Law had already accepted me. I had a studio apartment in Morningside Heights and a work-study position at a corporate law firm downtown. Mother called it running away from responsibility. Father said nothing at all, which somehow hurt worse. But New York gave me something Greenwich never did, a place where my mind mattered more than my last name. Where professors called on me because I knew the answer, not because they were being polite. Where senior partners noticed my work, not my brother's charm. I came home for holidays, but only barely. Each visit reminded me why I'd left. Then 3 years ago, Father called my office directly. Not Mother. Not the family line. My direct work number that he shouldn't have even had. "Sharon," he said, voice tight with something I'd never heard before. "I need your help. And I need you to tell no one." I made junior partner at Hartwell and Associates by 28. Not because of my name. Nobody in Manhattan cared about Connecticut real estate dynasties, but because I'd saved 3 supposedly unsalvageable companies from bankruptcy in 18 months. I specialized in corporate restructuring, the kind of work that required you to see patterns others missed, to understand how money actually moved through complex systems, to know which assets mattered and which were just expensive distractions. Turns out, growing up invisible had taught me to pay attention. While William was learning how to work a room, I was learning how rooms actually worked. The difference showed in my billable hours and his quarterly losses, not that anyone back home was counting. My reputation grew quietly but solidly. CFOs called me when their boards panicked. Family businesses reached out when the 3rd generation was driving them into the ground. I learned to read balance sheets the way some people read novels, seeing the story beneath the numbers, understanding what people were hiding and why. The occasional visits home became increasingly painful. I'd see the signs everywhere: deferred maintenance on properties, vendors waiting months for payment, long-time employees looking worried in ways they tried to hide. William would be holding court at some charity gala Mother organized, talking about aggressive expansion and bold new strategies that any first-year analyst could tell you were financial suicide. Father started calling me every few months. Unofficial advice, he'd say. What did I think about a particular deal structure? How would I handle a difficult tenant situation? Could I look at some contracts just as a favor? I'd answer honestly, and he'd go quiet for a long moment before thanking me and hanging up. Mother's criticisms grew sharper with each promotion. All that education, and still unmarried, she'd say at Christmas dinner. Men don't like women who are more successful than they are, Sharon. You're becoming so aggressive, so unfeminine. It's not attractive. William found it hilarious. Still playing lawyer, little sister? Must be nice billing hours while the rest of us do real work. He'd said that at Easter, 3 months after I'd prevented a hostile takeover of a Fortune 500 company. He'd said it while Father sat at the head of the table, saying nothing. But late one night, after too much scotch at Thanksgiving, Father found me alone in his study. I was looking at the old photos, him breaking ground on his first development, young and hungry and brilliant. I groomed the wrong child, he said quietly.
It shows tradition over truth.
And now I'm watching everything I built turn to dust in his hands. He walked out before I could respond. But 6 months later, that phone call came. I met him at his private office on a Tuesday morning when Mother thought he was at a medical appointment and William was supposedly touring a development site. Father looked 10 years older than at Thanksgiving. The folders spread across his desk told me why. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. I need you to look at these as my attorney, not my daughter. His hands shook slightly as he pushed the first stack toward me. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm being paranoid. I wasn't wrong, and he wasn't paranoid. 3 hours later, I'd traced nearly $2 million in systematically diverted funds. William had created shell companies with names similar enough to legitimate vendors that casual audits missed them. Maintenance contracts paid to his college roommate's cousin for work never performed. Property improvements that existed only on paper. Marketing expenses for campaigns that never ran. He'd been bleeding the company for 5 years, and he'd gotten sloppy enough in the last 18 months that even basic forensic accounting revealed the pattern. But the embezzlement was almost secondary to the disastrous business decisions. William had leveraged properties we owned outright to fund developments in markets he didn't understand. He'd violated loan covenants, ignored due diligence, trusted the wrong partners. 3 projects were underwater. 2 were in litigation. Without immediate intervention, cruise industries would be insolvent within 14 months. I chose charm over competence, Father said, voice breaking. I chose what I wanted to see over what was actually there. And now we're paying for it. All of us, me, you, the 150 families who depend on our payroll. He slid a second folder across the desk. Inside were draft documents my own firm might have prepared. Corporate restructuring. New stock issuance that would dilute William's shares to nearly nothing. Voting rights transfer. Irrevocable trusts that would place operational control entirely in someone else's hands. In my hands. You're the only one who can save what I built, he said. I'm asking you to do it in secret. Let me handle your mother and William. But I need this done legally, permanently, and immediately. We spent 3 days locked in conference rooms with his most trusted attorneys and accountants. People who'd known me since childhood, who'd watched me grow up invisible, now watching me systematically assume control of a commercial empire. The signing ceremony happened in complete silence except for pages turning and pen scratching. When it was done, Father gripped my hand across the table. Let them think everything's normal until I'm gone. Let William keep playing CEO.
Can you do that?
I looked at the documents that made me the secret owner of everything William thought was his birthright. Yes, I said. I can do that. For 3 years, I lived 2 lives. In Manhattan, I was Sharon Cruz, senior partner, the woman CFOs called when everything was burning. At home, I was still the invisible daughter, the one who didn't understand the family business, the one William patronized at holiday dinners while describing deals I'd already quietly killed through back channels. William kept making catastrophic decisions. I kept stopping them before they became fatal. A disastrous land acquisition in Phoenix. I had our CFO discover permit issues that made Father pull funding. A partnership with developers under federal investigation. I anonymously tipped our general counsel, who convinced Father to walk away. William never knew why his brilliant ideas kept falling apart. He just got angrier, more reckless, more convinced he needed to prove himself. Every Sunday evening, Father would call my direct line. Sometimes it was business, another fire that needed putting out, another vendor who needed paying before they filed a lien. Sometimes he just wanted to teach me things he'd never taught William. How he'd identified his first undervalued property. The mistakes he'd made in his 30s. The partnerships that built the empire, and the ones that nearly destroyed it. Still our secret? He'd ask at the end of each call. Until the right moment, I'd answer. But I watched him weaken with every visit. The tremor in his hands became permanent. His sentences sometimes trailed off mid-thought. Mother hired nurses and called it managing his stress. She also started hosting dinners for William and board members, subtle coronation rehearsals where she positioned her son as the natural successor. Sharon, dear, you don't need to stay for the business discussion, she'd say, ushering me toward the parlor with the other wives. I'm sure you'd be more comfortable with coffee and dessert. I'd smile and go. Let them think I didn't care. Let William describe his vision to men who'd already received my confidential memos explaining why we were doing the exact opposite. Thanksgiving, 3 years after the signing, Father could barely hold his fork. But when everyone else went to the living room for football, he caught my wrist. Soon, he whispered. I can feel it. Everything's arranged. The attorney knows. When the time comes, you'll know what to do. His hand was thin as paper, but his grip was iron. I'm ready, I told him. I wasn't sure if either of us believed it. If you're invested in seeing how this family falls apart at that reading, do me a favor and subscribe. Because what happens in the next 4 months will show you exactly why staying silent for 3 years was the most strategic decision I ever made. The ending is going to hit different, and I don't want you to miss a single second of it. Father collapsed at the office 4 months later. By the time I got the call, he was already installed in the hospital bed they'd set up in the master suite, doctors coming and going with expressions that said everything without words. Mother transformed overnight into the grieving wife, all dramatic sighs and coordinated mourning outfits. She called the family meeting 3 days later. Just the four of us, Mother, William, Caroline, and me, gathered in Father's study while he slept upstairs under sedation. The documents were already spread across the desk, neat and official-looking. "We need to simplify the estate," Mother announced, dabbing her eyes though they were perfectly dry. "The attorneys say it will be so much easier if we handle certain technicalities now before—" Her voice broke on cue. "Before we have to deal with probate and courts and all that ugliness." William slid a paper toward me. "It's just a formality, Sharon. You sign away any claim to the business assets, and in return, you get a very generous cash settlement. Everyone's happy. Everything's clean." I scanned the waiver. It would have stripped me of every right to Cruise Industries, the properties, the investment accounts, everything I'd spent 3 years secretly protecting. "No," I said simply. Caroline leaned forward, voice honey-sweet. "Sharon, we know you've built your own career. You don't need the family business. This is about preserving what Father built, keeping it in the family properly. It's about unity." "Unity," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it?" Mother's tears became real then, or real enough. "How can you be so selfish? Your father is dying upstairs, and you're going to make this difficult? You're going to drag this through courts and destroy this family over pride." William's jaw tightened. "Sign the paper, Sharon. Don't make this ugly." I stood, leaving the document untouched. "I won't sign away what isn't yours to give." The silence that followed was venomous. "You'll regret this," William said. The text started that night. Mother's were theatrical guilt trips. William's were threats thinly veiled as concern. Caroline's were passive-aggressive essays about family loyalty. I deleted them without responding. But every other night, I'd slip into Father's room when the nurses changed shifts. He'd be awake sometimes, eyes clear despite the medications. "They asked you to sign," he said once. "Not a question." I didn't. His hand found mine in the dark. "Good girl." He fell asleep smiling. The formal invitation arrived on cream cardstock with gold embossing. "You are invited to attend the reading of the last will and testament of Jonathan Cruise." Mother had included a handwritten note at the bottom. "Please dress appropriately. Business associates will be present." She'd turned a legal proceeding into a social event. Extended family I hadn't seen in years received invitations. Father's business partners. Board members. The senior VP who'd worked with him for 30 years. Even Caroline's parents, as if this were some kind of wedding reception for William's ascension. I heard through my assistant that Caroline had gone shopping at Bergdorf's specifically for the occasion. New Chanel suit.
Hermes bag.
The outfit of a woman about to become very, very wealthy. My own invitation had arrived 3 days after everyone else's, forwarded through my law firm rather than sent to my home. The message was clear. You're invited out of obligation, not importance. I packed my briefcase with the methodical care I used before major litigation. The original corporate restructuring documents, each page flagged and indexed. Stock certificates showing the actual ownership percentages. The irrevocable trust documents with Father's bold signature and 3 witnesses. Transfer orders that had been filed with the state 3 years ago. Every piece of paper that proved William's coronation was built on a foundation that no longer existed. The morning of the reading, against every doctor's order, Father insisted on attending. The nurses protested. Mother tried to convince him to rest. But he was immovable, and ultimately it was still his choice. They brought him in a wheelchair, wrapped in blankets despite the spring warmth, but his eyes were alert. He found me in the parking lot and nodded once. I nodded back. The conference room at Harrison and Associates looked nothing like a legal proceeding and everything like a victory party. Champagne chilling in ice buckets.
Gâté d'hors d'œuvre en silver tray.
Flower arrangements that must have cost thousands. William stood at the center, already holding court, accepting handshakes and congratulations for an inheritance he hadn't actually received yet. Mother presided like royalty, tissues ready for her performance, diamonds glittering at her throat. I took a seat in the back, briefcase at my feet, and watched them celebrate. Watched William describe his vision for the company's future to men who'd already been quietly implementing my restructuring plan for 3 years. Watched Caroline show off jewelry she'd bought on credit against money that would never come. Father sat silent in his wheelchair near the attorney's desk, wrapped in blankets, watching me. I gave him the smallest smile. It was time. Harrison cleared his throat and began reading. Standard bequests first. $50,000 to father's sister, $25,000 to his college roommate, charitable donations to organizations he'd supported for decades. The room listened politely, waiting for the main event. Then, to my son, William Jonathan Cruz, I leave the sum of $500,000 and the family residence in Greenwich, Connecticut. Confused murmurs rippled through the room. William's smile flickered. Where was the business? The properties? The investment portfolio? There must be a mistake, William interrupted, half rising from his seat. Harrison continued without acknowledging him. To my daughter, Sharon Elizabeth Cruz, I leave the sum of $500,000 and... William relaxed back into his chair, shooting me a look of smug satisfaction.
See?
Equal distribution. The business assets come next. But Harrison's expression had changed. However, regarding Cruz Industries and all associated commercial assets, he paused, adjusting his glasses. This is where matters become more complex. I stood, picked up my briefcase, and walked to the front of the room. Every head turned. The clicking of my heels on the marble floor was the only sound. I opened the case on Harrison's desk and began laying out documents with the precision of a closing argument. First, the corporate restructuring papers, each page dated 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days ago. Then the stock certificates, clean, legal, registered with the state, showing Sharon E. Cruz as holder of 75% controlling interest in Cruz Industries. Finally, the irrevocable trust documents, thick and bound, with father's signature witnessed by 3 attorneys whose names William would recognize. Harrison took the first document with trembling hands. His face went from pink to gray as he scanned each page, cross-checking dates, verifying notary seals, examining the corporate filings. The room had gone silent. Not the anticipatory silence from before. This was the silence of a car accident happening in slow motion. These documents predate the will, Harrison said slowly, and are legally binding and properly executed. According to these filings. He looked up at the room, then directly at William. Sharon Cruz is and has been the primary owner and controlling shareholder of Cruz Industries for 3 years. There are no business assets remaining in the estate to distribute. William lunged forward. That's impossible. Dad was sick, he didn't know. I knew exactly what I was doing. Father's voice cut through the chaos, weak but absolutely clear. Every eye turned to the wheelchair. I made this choice with full mental capacity and legal counsel present. William was destroying everything I built. Sharon saved it. I chose competence over blood. The room exploded. William lunged across the desk, grabbing for the documents. 2 of Father's business partners stepped between us, blocking him. His face had gone purple with rage. This is elder abuse. Manipulation. She took advantage of a sick man who didn't know what he was signing. Caroline's champagne flute shattered against the floor. She stood frozen for 3 seconds, then grabbed her new Hermes bag and ran for the door, heels skittering on marble. The door slammed so hard the flower arrangement shook. Mother's tissue fell from her hand. She stared at me like I was something that had crawled out from under a rock. "You did this. You poisoned him against his own son." "William stole from me," Father said, voice gaining strength from somewhere deep. "Nearly $2 million over 5 years. Sharon saved the company, saved our reputation, saved the jobs of 150 families who depend on us. I chose competence over blood because blood was bankrupting me." The room erupted in whispers. Board members pulled out phones. Business associates exchanged glances that said they'd suspected something for years. Harrison cleared his throat. An internal audit was conducted 3 years ago. The documentation of Mr. William Cruz's financial improprieties is extensive and has been sealed pending potential legal action. William spun on him. "You're lying. All of you. This is a conspiracy. I'll sue every person in this room. I'll drag this through courts for years." Harrison's expression didn't change. "Any lawsuit you file will require discovery. Discovery will expose the embezzlement. Given the amounts involved and the creation of fraudulent vendor accounts, federal charges are possible. I would strongly advise against litigation." Mother turned on Father, her composure finally cracking. "How could you do this? How could you betray your own son? Your heir?" Father's hands gripped the wheelchair arms. "How could he betray the 150 families who trusted us? The employees who gave us decades of loyalty? I built something that mattered." He turned it into his personal piggy bank. William stood shaking, surrounded by people who'd congratulated him 10 minutes ago and now wouldn't meet his eyes. "You'll regret this, Sharon. You'll regret destroying this family." I picked up my briefcase and looked at him for the last time. "The company will survive without you, William. It almost didn't survive with you." I walked past Mother sobbing into her hands. Past business associates already calculating their positions in the new reality. Past Father, who gave me the smallest nod. The door closed on William's rage and Mother's tears. I didn't look back. 6 months later, William was under federal investigation. The forensic accountants I'd quietly hired had documented everything, every fake invoice, every shell company, every fraudulent wire transfer. His attorney kept calling mine with settlement offers that grew more desperate each week. Caroline filed for divorce before the ink dried on the audit report, taking their Hamptons timeshare and whatever jewelry she could liquidate. Mother became a social pariah overnight. The charity board she'd chaired for decades suddenly had restructuring priorities. Her country club friends stopped returning calls. She told anyone who'd listen that I'd stolen her son's birthright, manipulated a dying man, destroyed a family. I heard the rumors and kept working. The father lived 3 more months. I moved him to a private facility in Westchester with round-the-clock care, away from Mother's theatrical grief and William's rage. I visited every day after work, sometimes just sitting beside his bed while he slept, sometimes reading him reports about the company's recovery. He died on a Tuesday morning with spring sun streaming through the windows and my hand in his. His last words were, "You saved it. You saved everything that mattered." I ran the company the way he'd taught me in those Sunday evening calls, with competence, integrity, and an eye toward the people whose livelihoods depended on our decisions. Profitability climbed 40% in 6 months. Employee satisfaction surveys came back with ratings we hadn't seen in a decade. I promoted from within, acquired 2 struggling competitors, and restructured operations that William had driven into chaos. Mother's calls and emails went straight to block numbers. William's desperate messages, offering to work things out, suggesting we move forward as a family, never got past my assistant. Some doors, once closed, stay closed. My office now held the things that mattered. Father's photo from the groundbreaking of his first development, his eyes bright with possibility. The thank you notes from employees whose pensions I'd protected. The Wall Street Journal article calling cruise industry's turnaround one of the most impressive corporate recoveries in recent memory. Last month's board meeting was unanimous. They voted me permanent CEO, no interim qualifier, no probationary period. The same men who'd congratulated William at the will reading now stood and applauded. I didn't need their approval anymore, but I accepted their respect. They taught me I was invisible. I used that invisibility to become unstoppable. I learned to see clearly because no one was watching me. I learned to build in silence because no one expected me to build anything at all. You want to know the real lesson? The people who underestimate you are giving you the greatest gift imaginable. They're not watching. They're not preparing. They're not protecting themselves against you. And by the time they realize you were the threat all along, it's already too late. Being invisible doesn't mean being powerless. Sometimes it means being the only one in the room who actually sees what's happening. Some doors close forever. And sometimes that's the only way forward. If you made it this far, you're my people. Subscribe because this channel is for everyone who's ever been the invisible one, the underestimated one, the one who had to prove their worth in silence. You belong here. Drop a comment and tell me, who in your life underestimated you? Because I read every single one, and your stories matter just as much as mine. Your story doesn't end here. Click that video on your screen. It's about someone just like you, someone who was dismissed and discounted until the day they took everything back. These are the stories that matter. The ones about people who refuse to stay invisible. Go watch it now, and I'll meet you in the comments section. Let's keep this conversation going.